So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen out there, and thank you for agreeing to be a part and parcel of this live broadcast this afternoon. Um, Today, we're going to be continuing on where we stopped on Wednesday, which is looking at the principles of personal leadership. Now, you will recollect that I mentioned from the onset that uh, leadership of an organization, leadership of a fellowship, leadership of a family, a group, or whatever begins first with a personal leadership, personal responsibility. So, if you are a leader or you are occupying a leadership position, it does not necessarily mean that you're a leader unless you exhibit certain leadership qualities that are expected of you as an individual. So, welcome to this broadcast, and again, thank you for the willingness to join on this broadcast. In a short while, I will be sharing with us some principles that may be necessary for us to understand our leadership principles and to understand how we need to grow as individuals first before we can lead a group or lead an organization. These are the areas of focus that we shall be looking at today. So please, having joined us, I appreciate you for agreeing to join us and to be a part and parcel of this session. Now, as is customary with these sessions, okay, we'll give room for questions, we'll give room for comments, we'll give room for clarity where you require clarity. So please feel free that as you join us, all right, as you join this live session, please feel free to ask questions where necessary, and feel free to make comments where you even disagree with certain things or certain positions, as it were. Once again, thank you for coming online with me. Now, before I proceed, I just have a couple of announcements to make. On the 1st of February 2021, Born to Lead will start a leadership academy. Now, if you're joining this broadcast, you may be amongst the earliest to know and to understand this concept. Our idea is to so train and so empower everyone that wherever you go, you will stand out as an individual. You will be the pace setter. You will be an edge. You will be the figure that people will look up to and attempt to be like. Okay? That's the idea of this leadership academy. We do recognize and realize that a number of us have failed to take seriously the concept of leadership, not because we do not want to, but because the way the world has been shaped is to make us think that leadership is for a class of people, is for a group of persons, and that if you do not belong to that group, you have no reason wanting to know what leadership is all about. But I'll challenge you, and just in case you fall in that category, that you take up this course, you learn, you understand what leadership is, so that even if you do not want to exhibit the leadership qualities that are buried in the inside of you, at least you can know whether a leader is performing or not, and you can hold such leaders to responsibility. That's the essence of this. So I encourage you, I implore you to be a part and parcel of this training and to take seriously this concept of leadership training, as it were. We'll do several courses, but just to whet your appetite, I've listed out just about 5 so you understand what the direction we're taking. We're going to take the direction of helping you understand what leadership is. We're going to explore all the philosophies of leadership, the mentalities, the ideas. We're going to explore them and draw out to take the best, the one that we ought to be practicing on a daily basis. We're going to look at crisis situation and how to lead within crisis situation. There is no better time to exhibit leadership than in crisis situation. The world is going through a crisis at the moment, and we're seeing how several leaders are responding to this idea of COVID. All right, and some have been reckless with the concept or with the disease and have got their fingers burnt. Some have been up to date, and by being up to date, they have been able to tackle the situation. We would also understand the challenges that leaders face, and then we will know the various styles of leadership. Those are some of the topics that we shall be looking at as we proceed henceforth. All right. Now to the course properly. Last week, I began by saying that you were born to lead, and I gave 4 reasons. 1, your birth circumstance. 2, that you have a purpose. 3, that you were born with skills and abilities, and if you exhibit these skills and abilities, if you develop them to the fullest, the world has no choice but to run after you. And 4, the 4th dimension, and I said spiritually, if you believe in the story of creation, you know that we were created in the image and likeness of God Almighty. And if God is a leader, then he has also empowered us and enabled us to be a leader. And we also talked about the fact that, look, principles are laws that never change. There are laws that are operational in every clime and for all sexes, all persons of beliefs, and whatever you may think that you are or have. Okay? So, and based on that, we were saying that there are several principles. We must take the concept of principles seriously. Okay, there are several principles that guide several aspects of our lives. Now, no matter how religious, no matter how morally pure you are, if you do not apply these principles as they ought to be applied, certain things will not fall in place. Certain things will not be operational. Okay, so this is the reason why we're insisting that you've got to take the concept of principles very, very well. And so when we talk about principles, we're talking about set of rules that apply to all humans, never change, and are key and fundamental to our existence. We talked about, in looking at some of the principles for people who have discovered their personal leadership. The first principle, we say they discovered purpose. Okay, every person of purpose fulfills his or her leadership role. Every person of purpose fulfills he or her leadership role. The next is that personal leaders are people who have vision. Okay, Ellen Keller said the worst thing than seeing is having sight and lacking vision. All right. The next is that every personal leader has a passion, something they are willing to die for, something they believe so much that they are willing to give up their lives for. Okay, Mahatma Gandhi fasted for so long, in fact, went on hunger strike for so long until India got independence. That was his passion, and he pursued it with all his heart. Then we looked at convictions. I would say convictions arise when people discover what they do not need human approvals to pursue. Okay? All the time we're being harassed by people who want us to look up to them for approval. But convictions, once you've gotten your conviction, you no longer seek for human approval. You just go ahead. The world may hate you for your conviction, but you go ahead all the while. And people who have discovered personal leadership in their lives are people who have compassion for the dignity of humans. Martin Luther King was one perfect example. He believed that all men were created equal and they ought to live equally. So he fought for the blacks in the United States of America and the world at large until his death. He had that compassion for the human race. Then the sixth principle where we stopped last week was that leaders have values. They have ethical sets of rules. They do not bend these values or rules, even if it will cost them their lives. Now, I do not know where you found yourself wanting. I do not know where you have given yourself pluses. But my desire is that at the end of the 12th principle, you will determine to practice all the principles, to apply them to your life. And they are easy. Okay, they may sound difficult. They may start with rough edges, but I can tell you, having practiced a number of them, and I'm still growing in them, that at the start it becomes difficult, but as you continue, everybody abandons you. People, when I say abandon you, it doesn't mean that people stop relating with you. What happens is that people who keep to these values become the people who keep company with you. Okay? Now, so that was where we stopped. Today we'll be looking at the seventh principle, which is that the seventh principle is that you must have a clear plan. You are never mixed up. Okay? Benjamin Franklin, that is his picture, was a great scientist, a writer, an inventor, a statesman, a civil leader, a diplomat, and so on and so forth. A politician too. All right? Stated that by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. He who does not plan, plans to fail. Every true leader has a great plan. Not just a great plan, but a clear plan. It is one thing to have a vision, it is another thing to have a plan to fulfill that vision. And great leaders are people who break their visions into plans, and they're able to follow these plans through. The plans are clear, they are not mixed up. There are days that the plans are very evident to everyone, all right? And people do not get confused about these plans. And because the plans are written down, you are able to check and be sure that you are keeping to the plan. You are guaranteed, you are assured that your plans will come to pass only because you are following the plans and executing the plans as were expected. Now, you may have challenges, like I said, but because you have plans written down, you are able to follow these plans to the latter. You are able to execute them as they ought to be executed. He who has a plan, no matter how weak the plan is by far better than anyone who has a vision in his head. One thing I've realized, having tried and attempted several plans, is the fact that the ones that I wrote down were easily executed than the ones that I never penciled down. And somehow, okay, because you have written plans down, what happens is that even nature conspires to bring your plans to pass. Even nature conspires, everything around you conspires to bring your plans to pass. Now, the first time I started to write down plans was like about 25 years ago or thereabout. And then I did a 10-year plan. That 10-year plan included getting a job, resigning from the job, and going into business and staying put in business no matter how it happens for me. Okay? Now, the truth is, when I wrote down those plans, I really went back to look at the plans. But every time I looked at the plans and assessed the plans, I just realized that I had taken certain steps without even recognizing or realizing that I was taking those steps. And at the end of 10 years, when I reviewed the plan, I had achieved more than 98% of the things that I had written down. That even included marriage, it included, so I had gotten a public service job. And one day in the office, I just sat down and honestly, with no thought, no long thought, I just brought out a piece of paper, wrote my resignation, and I was off. Now, when I looked at the plan book, I just realized it was about the same time I had determined I would stay for the job that I was resigning. So, having written it down, somehow it had imprinted upon my heart and had come to pass. Right now, I have a 10-year goal plan. It started 2 years ago, and I'm seeing everything fall in place. And you see, when you write down plans and execute them, people will envy you, people will admire you, people will cherish you without knowing that you had written down these plans and you were executing them just as they were tabulated. So, for every true leader, you must have a clear plan. You must never get mixed up. And like Benjamin Franklin says, you must ensure that you prepare so that you don't fail. Okay? By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. That's what Benjamin Franklin says. Now, the next principle, and like I said, please, if you are with me and hear anything that is worthy of repetition or asking questions or interaction, please feel free to write down those details, and we will interact as this session goes on, please. All right. So thank you so much. The next principle that every personal leader must hold on to is the principle of dedication. Wholehearted dedication. You must find a vision, plan goals, and be dedicated to fulfilling those goals and those visions. You must be so committed to whatever you have planned to do that nothing on earth is able to distract you or detract you from your goal. Rachel E. Godrich says, don't ever give up. Don't ever give in. And you find yourself succumbing to one of the above for a brief moment, pick yourself up, brush yourself off, whisper a prayer, and start where you left off. But never, ever, ever give up. Never, ever, ever give up. This is one advantage that persons of dedication have, which is that they always fulfill all that they set out to fulfill. The Wright brothers were dedicated to ensuring that humans flew. From the picture that you can see, you see what they had invented as an aeroplane. It was so shallow, it was so empty, yet they were so dedicated to flying that eventually this machine took off, flew for some meters or for a few kilometers and landed. Why? Because they were dedicated, they were committed, their entire life had been poured out to flying. And while this was ongoing, a lot of us may not recognize, but their father had talked to a principal of a Christian science school where the principal suggested that someday people will fly, and their father insisted that was impossible, it will never happen. Meanwhile, at his backyard, his boys were attempting to get humans to fly. And today, the airline industry is a huge industry. It has metamorphosed from one phase to the other. It has grown from leisure to travel to business to even military. Okay? And today we're even thinking of taking tourists to the moon. All this happened because the Wright brothers were dedicated to that task, that goal, that vision that they had. How they came about this vision, one cannot tell. But obviously, they saw birds flying and thought that humans could also fly. And they committed themselves. They dedicated their entire being, their entire lives to flying. And today, there's no way you can talk about airplanes without talking about the Wright brothers. There's no way. What they did wasn't luxurious because they were not considering luxury. They were just considering flying. It was after they had determined and pursued and were dedicated to this goal that people began to think of luxury, speed, shape, and so on and so forth. Now, the truth is that every dedicated person, every person who pours out his heart to a vision and a goal ends up becoming a leader. And when I talk about goals, visions, and so on and so forth, I'm not talking about criminal situations. I'm talking about dedicated to something that is true, something that is worthwhile, something that is enhancing for the human race, something that elevates life and living to be precious and to be good. Again, like Churchill E. Godrich said, don't ever give up. Don't ever give in. Don't ever stop trying. Don't ever sell out. Sometimes you may succumb to this, but the advice is brush yourself off, pick yourself up, start where you left off, but ensure that you never, never, ever give up. There are days that you suffer defeat. There are days that you suffer pain. There are days that you suffer loss. But in spite of that, you must never, ever give up. You must rise up. You must pursue this to the end and ensure that you succeed in whatever you do. And if you do that, you will be considered a leader. The next is the ninth principle, the principle of persistence. This is slightly different from dedication. Dedication is committing your heart to it. Persistence is insisting on what you dream of, bearing up under pressure, because in life there will constantly be pressure. There's not a single day that you do not feel pressure. There's not a single time that you are not broken down by pressures. There's not a single moment that, well, or a single venture that you pursue that pressures do not come up. But a persistent person, a persistent leader is one who succeeds in spite of the pressure. In fact, it is in spite of the pressure that we know who is persistent or not. A number of us cannot stand up under pressure. And if that is your case, you cannot be considered to be a leader. Winston Churchill says this, that success is stumbling from failure to failure. Success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. In other words, you fail, but you rise up. You fail, but you rise up. And the best book of leadership says that though the righteous fall 7 times, they will always rise up. In other words, it is not the number of failures that you have, but rather the number of times that you are able to rise up from your failures that determines whether you are a leader or not. Winston Churchill became the Prime Minister of England at a very critical time during the Second World War. England is a tiny island nation. Okay? Just a tiny island nation surrounded by water with a limited population. And so while they were challenged by Germany during the Second World War, one would have thought that giving up should have been the easiest thing for them to do. But Winston Churchill mobilized them, encouraged them, pushed them on, and insisted they stood up against Germany. And because of his persistence, the British Army took up arms against the German invaders, and they fought hard until all allies rallied around them, and together they were able to defeat the mighty Germany then. And so he was able to say that success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. What a great leader Winston Churchill is. These are many years have passed since this great leader passed on, yet the narration of the history of England will not be complete without a mention of Winston Churchill. In fact, some have suggested that he is the greatest prime minister to have ever led England. Well, that is debatable. But what is not debatable is that you cannot write off his name when you talk about the history of great England, of great UK. Britain today can stand and become a force in the world only because they had a prime minister who insisted that he forge ahead with this war and he never gave up. I've been struggling a bit because of my health. So that we'll continue to look at the principles that abound as far as becoming a personal leader is concerned. So I'll draw the curtain here and appreciate you all for being a part and parcel of today's broadcast. See you tomorrow. Thank you.